Okay, so we're off. And a very warm welcome to Affi Khan. Thank you very much for joining me, Affi. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me, Johnny.
My pleasure. Excellent stuff. So we're going to be discussing some topics around the title of Statement of Work as a Competitive Advantage in the War for Talent. So there's some really interesting and meaty topics we can get into around that. Before we do that, could you just give a little bit of background on what you do and kind of where you've kind of come from in your journey?
Okay, so I'm Affi Khan. I'm the Chief Executive for CPL UK on the technology and healthcare sectors. So I've been a recruiter all my life. I went straight out of school, straight into recruitment, straight into some jobs and got into recruitment at a very early age. And most of my career has been in the public sector recruitment market. Where most recently I had a business that I sold to CPL Resources PLC in 2017. And that was a doctors and allied health recruitment business, which was called RIG. That business had 1,000 contractors going through the I-35 changes in the public sector. So it is sort of, I've been through the war, I've got the scars to show it. To prove it. And since then, we went on and built a technology recruiter within the group as well, which is part of under my umbrella too. And so I guess I'm our second time round, I'm going through these IR35 changes in the private sector, which has made me somewhat of someone well versed in the subject.
And in terms of this whole kind of talent and recruitment space, you know, a lot of people kind of tend to sort of fall into it, but what was it that drew you to this area? And what is it? I know you're really passionate about the talent space. What is it about that that's so appealing to you?
Well, a lot of people say they fell into recruitment. I think for me, I'm proud to be a recruiter, and I didn't go to college. I don't have a degree, so actually I didn't fall into recruitment. Recruitment was a privilege. I was selling mobile phones on the high street in retail. And so for me, becoming a recruiter was something to be really proud of. And if 20 years later, almost 20 years later, I'm still proud to be a recruiter. So it wasn't an accident for me. I love recruitment. I love making a difference to people's lives. And I'm also really enthusiastic about the difference that good talent can make to a company. I think all a business really is a combination of people coming together who believe in a similar thing, who work towards a similar mission. So I think talent is key, is core to all innovation, all achievement, good government, good society, good companies. So for me, I love what I do.
Yeah, and I love your description of companies as matching people with purpose.
Yeah,
I think that's pretty much what you just described, but ultimately that's almost like, it's like the ultimate leadership scenario, isn't it? Everybody working towards a common objective that's well communicated, everybody buys into it. That's the ideal scenario.
yeah.
Obviously for some companies and some people, it doesn't always end up, necessarily looking like that, or they don't think about it like that. But I think it's that's the real aspirational way to look at it. I like that.
I think so.
Yeah, I kind of have a similar lens, slightly different angle when I look at the world of work. So I've been involved in various different things within the workforce technology space, obviously now focusing on services procurement and statement of work as a vehicle for getting things done. And I think for me, in a similar kind of simplistic sort of way, it comes down to getting things done, and just get the job done, move forwards, be productive, make great things happen. But that relies on talent. It relies on skills, and there are different ways to get access to skills and to talent. And that's what I'm really passionate to talk about when it comes to looking at how companies do things and how companies structure things.
Absolutely.
And I think when you get something like IR35 that happens, it's just such a big change that it forces companies, it's just such a big obstacle that it forces companies to assess what they're doing, whereas previously maybe they didn't have to.
Mm-hmm.
But you've obviously seen this in the public sector.
Yeah.
And you're now seeing it happen in the private sector, probably seeing some of the same mistakes.
Yeah,
but
I am.
there's been a lot else going on as well, hasn't there, really, in the last year?
I think so. Something else Yeah, a pandemic, I think.
I think it was a pandemic, but you guys, your business has gone through some interesting changes as well, hasn't it? In terms
Yeah,
of
it
like,
has. It has indeed. It has indeed. I mean, the working from home experiment has been a success for us. I'm pleased about that. It's enhanced our talent pool. It's just made it possible to align people who believe in what you believe in, irrespective of where they're based. Because we've gone into a hybrid working model, which means people from much further away that previously might not have been able to work with us are now working with us, and it feels like there's a lot of challenges that this pandemic threw at us, but there's also a lot of positive to take from it as long as we learn and move forward.
and you guys, you're also now part of the larger organization now as a group, aren't you?
Yes, yes. So that changed too, which was a massive change. Again, it's a testament to the quality of the group that throughout a pandemic, we were able to still sell the group to become part of a very large Japanese conglomerate called OSI Incorporated. So we're now part of a group with 3.2 billion turnover, over 80,000 employees, listed on the Japanese stock exchange, and it's made our UK footprint enormous. Enormous. Our UK turnover is just over 300 million now.
Wow.
Just in the UK alone.
And so basically, the part of the business where you're CEO of, that's focused on tech and healthcare, isn't it?
Correct.
So again, two extremely relevant areas. Tech has become more important than ever. Yeah. Healthcare has gone through some massive changes, become more important than ever. How's the pandemic? What has been the impact of the pandemic on the business? Obviously, apart from the remote working side of things, but just in terms of business with your clients.
Oh, very interesting question, actually, because whenever I talk to anybody about what I do, and I mention healthcare and technology, the natural assumption is because there was a pandemic, healthcare would have been really, really busy. And actually, the healthcare staffing market went through an extremely challenging time because the hospitals, understandably, focused only on COVID-related matters. All non-COVID related matters were put to the side, and it's widely covered in the media that the waiting lists have increased 100-fold. Mm-hmm. So what that also meant was that all those healthcare professionals who weren't dealing with COVID related matters were also put on the bench. So actually, our healthcare business went through a very challenging period, but now it's really, really busy. But that's a challenge in itself because you have to go through an artificial depression of the market and then a very big explosion of demand. So you have to manage that. And then on the technology side, it was actually, again, a very rapidly busy period in some of the markets we're in, for example, social media, where a number of our clients ramped up ridiculously fast. And it's, of course, a busy market is good, but too busy means you just can't keep up with the demand fast enough. So, and for us, we have a very core commitment to delivering for our clients. We don't just want to have loads of vacancies to feel good about ourselves. We also want to make sure that we're delivering. So it's been a roller coaster of a ride for different reasons, but an interesting one. And I'm grateful. I think where the healthcare market and the technology market in the long term have very positive indicators for growth.
Yeah. So basically going through an acquisition, the pandemic, affecting the markets, all remote working, all these different things. It must be quite nice now looking forward as things, start to ramp up, and as there's, obviously we're not out of the woods yet completely as far as the pandemic goes, but there's a little bit more certainty in some areas. Must be quite nice to look forward. Obviously IR35 has happened now, but that's kind of still really right in the mix as far as clients are concerned, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you say that. It's like, I wonder, the day I became CEO following the acquisition, and then for CPL Tech and Health, and I faced a Brexit, two IR35s, and a global pandemic for good measure.
Yeah.
Like, well, that's
the right man in the right place at the right time.
Well, I don't know. You know what Nietzsche said, that which does not kill you makes you stronger. So I hope that's true.
I remember, yeah, I think it must be. And if you can get through that and you can still have a really positive outlook, and obviously things are going great for you guys, and there's lots of scope for expansion, and there's lots of scope to solve problems that your clients are having to deal with. So that's great. But I remember early in my career talking to my boss and saying, God, I wonder what it's like to go through a recession. Wish I'd never, right before the kind of credit crisis, I'd never said that, and learned the hard way. But if you can make it through these things, and we have to make it through these things, then there's a lot of learnings that can be taken from it, and also change is opportunity, isn't it? Because
correct
where organizations are having to adapt, because if you look at certain things, like take for example services procurement, statement of work, there was a massive problem that companies were that had already with services procurement, where it's not measured effectively. They don't really know what they're getting for their money. There's rogue spend in the tail spend. It was a kind of a bit of a Wild West situation, but it wasn't important enough for companies to put at the top of their priority list.
Yeah.
But you throw in a few things like a pandemic, where suddenly there's a lot more remote, outsourced work delivery, outcome-based work delivery becomes more relevant because it doesn't really matter when or where people are working. It's about getting things done. Throw in IR35, which obviously changes the picture around just the kind of free-for-all in the contracting space.
Correct.
And you mentioned Brexit earlier as well. That puts a massive pressure on talent.
Yeah,
outsourcing then becomes another avenue. So suddenly you get these factors which create change, but it does create an opportunity. And obviously with all the changes that you guys have had, it must have created massive opportunities. I guess it's just hard staying on top of it all.
Yeah, it is, and you're absolutely right. The statement of work is definitely one of those products in the market that actually I think that there's a lot of people who do it badly, to sugarcoat it or to try to disguise what they're doing, which is just to try to find a way around IR35, and that gives it a bad name. And I think that if done properly, it's a really strong competitive advantage. And more so now than ever before, for three reasons. Number one is, of course, the elephant in the room is IR35 itself. Okay, because a statement of work, there is a space for it in the market. There are jobs that genuinely do fall into a bona fide statement of work, milestones, delivery-based, outcomes-based solution. Number two, it's Brexit in the UK. There has been a drop in sentiment, at least, if not for more technical loopholes to jump through, in Europeans who want to come and work in the UK. And number three is the pandemic has truly put the war for talent into hyperdrive, because it's truly gone global. And you've been saying globalization for a long time. Of course, yes, correct. But until we were able to really get comfortable with the experiment of everyone working from home, did the true capacity of globalization really get felt in the markets? Because now, as long as you've got the skill set, you could genuinely be anywhere. And that's a plus and a minus. Some say people voting for this working from home environment, even after the pandemic, is like turkeys voting for Christmas. Because if you no longer add any value in your physical presence, could your job be done somewhere else much cheaper? So there's the war for talent has truly gone global. And for all those reasons, solutions that can help attract more talent are going to give any company competitive advantage. And I think statement of work done properly can definitely do that.
Yeah, and I guess it's just it's a different way of accessing talent, isn't it?
Yeah, correct.
As I say, for me, it always comes back to how are you going to get the piece of work done?
Yeah.
And I think when you take that approach, you have options, and it's not a question of just saying as a blanket, it's always better to do it this way, or it's always better to do it that way. If companies can take an intelligent look at what they're doing, which the pandemic is forcing people to do, they can't afford to waste money. They can't afford to not know what value they're getting for their spend. They can't afford to not get things done on time for their customers. They have to look at what it is they need to do and have options as to how they do it. Because yeah, it might be great to get everything done with your permanent workforce, but that's going to be a massive cost on your bottom line. If you're a PLC, you might not want to show the headcount. There's all sorts of reasons why that might not be the perfect solution in every scenario. Likewise, with the contractor world, I feel like the contract world kind of just grew so big and messy. And you know, I-35, if contracting had been done properly in the first place, it wouldn't look like it does now, and there wouldn't have to be such a massive change. You know, where there's grey areas and stuff's kind of spilling over into what's considered to be disguised employment. So there's a major correction that's going to take place now. But in the right scenarios, contracting temp workers is still absolutely the best way to get certain things done, and it's an incredibly important resource capacity.
Correct.
For an organization. But like most organizations will do a lot of statement of work, but they won't. It won't necessarily feel like an obvious part of their workforce mix, because it will be associated with larger projects, maybe consulting, professional services that sit within procurement, where they'll be doing loads of stuff via statement of work anyway, because pretty much any service that's procured will be procured under a statement of work contract with deliverables, milestones, etc.
Correct, of course.
And that mechanism, when you start breaking it down to a more macro and micro level, it's the world is moving or has trended towards an increase in task or output based work delivery. And so yeah, you're absolutely right. If companies don't know how to use it effectively, or they can't use it effectively, they basically haven't got an option that they could have.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I think that I'm hoping anyway. I'm a bit of an optimist. I'm hoping that over time people will fathom onto this fact, and statement of work will prevail on a much wider scale. The challenge I think we're facing at the moment, Johnny, you might agree with me, is that IR35 changes came in. As usual, even though they were delayed by a year because of the pandemic, no one was really prepared. So everybody's now focusing on securing the existing base of workers, protecting themselves from risk, and thinking less about, is this solution fit for acquiring future talent? What I mean specifically is a large number of our blue chip customers and customers across the board, and I totally get why they're doing it, and we're helping them, are simply just transferring their temps onto a payroll services agreement, so managed services for payroll, so effectively to cut the risk of working through umbrella companies altogether. Because are you FCSA, are you not FCSA, are you professional passport, not professional passport, should you be, should you not be, who's auditing you, who's checking your pay slip, is the right pay slip, is there a wrong pay slip? It's so much unknown there, such bad practice out there, that a lot of big customers that we are seeing have simply gone, we're just not going to even engage on that front. We're just going to go PAYE payroll through a managed service, and we're going to do that. And that makes sense. It does make sense for your existing workforce who may be loyal to you, who are comfortable in their job, who like where they are, and they're going to continue doing what they're doing. Right, great. But how do you acquire talent going forwards? How do you get the best contractors in the market who genuinely could work in a statement of work environment, who now get told, no, I don't care, you have to be on a PAYE payroll? Well, many will say no.
Yeah, I mean, does this echo some of the things you saw in the public sector previously?
100%. It's also exactly the same thing. It was known as insourcing. So you had agencies who could not meet demand because the IR35 rates were no longer attractive, yet through the back door, you had largely fairly unregulated startups who would simply put those same candidates in and call it insourcing, because statement of work services weren't rolled out through bona fide providers like yourselves who do things properly. You have an online portal. We're proud to be working with you, which gives us deliverable milestones, outcomes. It goes out as an option to a number of contractor communities, so your people are bidding for work, just like mybuilder.com. Right? It's a proper statement of work service, which gives everybody peace of mind. And when the market doesn't do it, people start to find workarounds, and generally those workarounds are not really well thought through. They're sort of band-aids. They're sort of just pulled together just to make things work.
Yeah, and I think, these kind of short-term solutions typically will store up problems for the future. And in the public sector, certainly it pushed certain things into bad practice, but also it created resource capacity gaps for later. And I can see the same. I can see the same thing happening in the private sector, where in the short term, as you say, rightly, clients need to sort the burning problem right now, put that fire out. But if they're thinking about it strategically, they need to have a bit more of an open mind. It's like when some of the big banks and some of the big pharma companies have basically said no PSCs, for example, and just taken that kind of just a line in the sand approach. But there are going to be issues at some point down the line where projects that are urgently needed for their clients, for their products, are not going to get done. They're going to be behind. It's all very well, wipe the sweat off. We've solved that problem. We've got away with that risk. Haven't got to worry about that. But business productivity is going to suffer. And I guess that's kind of the message that people like yourself and certainly we are trying to put out to help educate the market, because it's a question of understanding all available resource channels, making sure that they are optimized to use all available resource channels at the appropriate point in a compliant manner, efficiently. And if companies can do that, then that opens up so many opportunities.
Yeah, well, the thing is, you have to start with a question. I think if you spoke to boards of these very large companies, the answer would be a unanimous yes. But whether that message is at the moment, because we're recovering from the pandemic and because we're having to react to comply with IR35 in many cases, I don't think that's cascaded down to the operational level just yet. But if you were to say to, let's say, IBM or Dell or the likes, can your entire workforce be permanent? They would go, no, of course not. It's not possible. You have to. Organizations of a certain scale need a certain amount of flexible contingent workers to go through seasonal demands, peaks and troughs, to be able to cut through tough corners, to be able to meet project deadlines, to be able to do a specific demand-led situation which requires a niche in one country but might not need it somewhere else, to also sometimes be able to break your own rules a little bit, like pay scales. Sometimes you have, some large organizations have, very thorough roadmaps for careers and pay scales and bandings, like the NHS does. And sometimes demand just doesn't allow you to be able to meet that. But if you go and solve those problems permanently, you've got a problem on your hands, because then you've got the rest of your workforce saying, hey, what's going on? How is that guy paid more? They're on the same banding as me. Whereas if you bring somebody in on a genuine short-term period, on a genuine statement of work, outcomes-driven, milestone-driven solution, then the reason you can justify that person having an increased income is because they've got increased risk.
Exactly, and they're ultimately being paid to deliver something.
That's it.
And I think it's a very pragmatic way to work. And I think the pandemic has forced pragmatism back into a lot of companies where maybe they were a little bit too comfortable. I'm not saying that's a great thing. It's obviously terrible the way that companies have had to go through this and the way it's affected the whole world. But it strips away any luxury of letting stuff go.
Correct.
And if as I say, in the right scenario, contractors are the best solution to get work done, as are temps, as are perm in the right scenario for perm. But I think with the way that the contractor market kind of got very big and messy and lazy, for business managers, stakeholders, operational people within organizations, right up to the C-suite, it's quite easy to be kind of trucking along with a load of people doing stuff on a time and materials basis, and kind of, everyone seems to be working hard, and are we doing well? Yeah, we seem to be doing well. If you actually have to really strip that back to kind of what we said before about everyone working together towards an objective, what's the key objective of the organization? How does that translate down to operational objectives? So someone within a department knows what they're expected to do as part of the overall objective. If you actually can then package up the work to what's actually needs to be delivered, what's the output, what's the outcome, and put a price against that, and get a supplier who takes on the risk of delivering that, that's
Correct.
incredibly pragmatic. You know, some
It is.
organizations might say, well, I think that's going to be more expensive. But is it? Because if you've just got a load of people working away on the never never, then how do you know what's being done? How do you know how much it's costing and all that sort of thing? So it does require a bit of a cultural shift. Is that something, I think within procurement people understand statement of work, and a lot of business stakeholders will be engaging suppliers under a statement of work. Where do you think there's maybe less of an understanding and acceptance of that model? Do you think it sits within the kind of talent and HR type space?
I think personally, I think it's just it's new in some terms. People are stuck in their old ways and habits. You know, I think it's no more difficult than signing off a timesheet, but it's habitual. I don't see why agreeing milestones and outcomes based on actual deliverables that have a cost associated against it is any harder than signing off a weekly timesheet, because that's also complex. You've got who did you work, authorization, pay and bill, everything else. It's just because people are used to it that there's a misconception that that's easier and this is harder. That's number one, I think personally. Secondly, I think there are some bad practice in people dressing up mutton as lamb, and you basically take a standard contract that you would have had for a contractor before IS 35, and you change a few terms along. They call it a statement of work at the top, and you change the word of this to associate and that to substitution, and you put this in there, and bang, you've got statement of work, which you haven't. I think that's scaring people off because people are aware of bad practice. So I think the key thing is, the main reason why I really was keen to join on this podcast was to create awareness. I think that's one of the main things we've got to do, is create awareness. Because I think once good practice, like the sort of platform that you deliver, starts to become a bit more present, I think the benefits of a proper statement of work agreement are self-evident.
Yeah, and that's why it's great for us to be able to work with people like yourselves, in the sense that, we're just the technology that provides a structure, you're providing a service around it. And so that's something that your clients can take advantage of and can make sure that they're doing it in the right way, because you do need structure, and you also need to make sure that the work is delivered in a manner that's consistent with the way that it's contracted. As you said, you can't just have a time and materials contractor, try and change them to some sort of quasi statement of work contract, and then have them carry on doing it in the same way, managing people, just working exactly as they were. And I think that's where, with a bit of education and a bit of support and the structure that can be provided by, for example, the service that you guys provide using technology such as that we provide, that provides a safety net for an organization to be able to do it properly. Audit trail, clear visibility, clear governance, standardized working practices and workflows, etc. And then it becomes something that's really, really feasible. But you're right about people being kind of stuck in ingrained habits. I think that's going to take a while to change. And one of the other things that I think is also something that's to be considered, which is, again, it's a bit of a change, but it's a valuable change and a valuable learning, is, in my experience, so previously I worked in the kind of job board world for a good few years. And one of the things that, if you get involved in the job board world, you understand that companies are not very good at writing jobs descriptions. A lot, from the recruiting world, this.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
It's a constant source of pain. And so there are simple elements to how you could create a good job description. And some companies, stakeholders, hiring managers, they just can't do it. They haven't got time. They can't be bothered. They don't know what to write. Or the company is always trying to update their library of standard job descriptions, etc. With a statement of work, there's the complexity of looking at it and saying, well, it's not just a Java developer. Actually, I need to get a piece of work done. And there's an art and there's a science to that. But again, it fits into a clear structure. And it just means that stakeholders are having to ask themselves, what actually is it they need to get done? But I think that's such a great question for organizations to have going on within their businesses, because it's really driving towards, am I doing something useful? Are we getting the work done? What's the objective and how do I work towards it? But I do think, in the same way as when you had the mass adoption of job boards, lots of recruitment companies and lots of job board companies were trying to educate hiring managers onto how to write a job spec, how to appeal to a candidate, how to describe the role and competencies and benefits and all that sort of thing. My personal view is the same thing needs to happen with regards to statement of work.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that's what it is. Again, it's habit. It's a head of engineering department is used to going through to their recruitment HR manager to give them a whole detail of what they need from the skills of an employee they're going to hire. That HR manager or their HR team would then write up job descriptions with all the employments and perks and everything else. That goes to the talent team. The talent team then try to create attractive, snazzy job adverts or LinkedIn themes or whatever else off the back of it. That's an onerous process in itself, and often ineffective, especially in areas of the market where talent shortage exists, right? It's the same if you just go backwards, and if you had more decision makers like the head of engineering who's prepared to engage with a statement of work supplier and give them full visibility on outcomes and deliverables, and say, okay, so take me through your project phase. Take me through exactly what deliverable you want at this stage, and this stage, and this stage, and this stage. What are the milestones here? Who are the key stakeholders? And if you're able to get them engaged to give you those information, because you can't create a statement of work platform properly without the engagement of the end user. But the point that I think you're trying to make, and correct me if I'm wrong, is it takes just as much effort to do that than to go through the writing of job descriptions, job adverts, and everything else. Am I right?
Exactly. I mean, it should tie into a business stakeholder's fundamental business planning.
Correct.
Because it should tie into what their objectives are and what they need to get done. That head of engineering is going to know what projects they're working on, how that needs breaking down and parceling up. And
Johnny, really, if I just add in there, I think that's where I keep beating this drum about recruiters being able to move up the value chain. In an ideal world, I'd be sitting as an advisor to that board, and they're saying, well, we need to ramp up our customer service team, and I'll be able to map their talent to be able to say, well, does the pool exist for you, and is it best to do that this way, or is it best to do it this way, or best to do it that way, or you need a team of Kubernetes technology developers. Okay, well, that's a skill shortage you're going to have struggle with. I think you need to work out a statement of work project, depending on what sort of project we need to be delivering against. A good talent advisor could give you which solution fits.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's true workforce solutions, isn't it? It's actually helping that company answer the fundamental question, which is, what is the most effective use of my resources?
Yeah. But 9 out of 10 workforce solution companies who call themselves workforce solution companies are really just managed service providers.
Yeah, and I guess that's partly that the market is still slightly immature in that area, but it's also that it's also a question of whether the companies are letting people in and buying into that. But it's kind of both sides need to be right. But yeah, I mean, just going back to what we were saying about the writing statements of work and packaging up work in that way, suppliers can help. We see it all the time where, a business, it might be something super technical where even that engineering manager doesn't understand, or a technology manager doesn't understand the details of the cybersecurity project that needs to be carried out, for example.
Yeah.
The suppliers do. But if you're going through a competitive bidding process with multiple suppliers and you've got an overall requirement, they can help you shape the final specification. And if you've got several suppliers working through a competitive process, then you should be able to come out of it with something that the client and supplier have agreed on, which is a feasible structure and something that's actually going to get done and is actually priced correctly. Sometimes there are changes along the way, but you can't make these things perfect. But I think that collaboration between supplier and business stakeholder is also crucial, because people might think they've got to solve every single nuance of it within their overall description, but actually a requirement's probably going to change by the time you get supplier input anyway. So I think that adds in this whole new world of collaboration where, again, it's people and businesses working together to solve problems. So
and it's a value add for talent partners to be able to offer that service, and it's a time-saving exercise for end clients who've got a business to run. Yes, you could articulate the ins and outs of every scope and every step and every deliverable and every milestone of the project you need delivered. But is that your value add? Or would you not rather have an expert who's done this 11 times before for very similar companies to yours, who can come in and as an advisory basis, do the scoping for you? Yeah. So you're not taking time away from growing your business, especially if you're a rapidly growing fintech. You're about to either pre-IPO, you've just had a Series B, and you've got that funding to make your product better, increase your customer base, or hire more salespeople to sell more of your product. Whatever you're doing, surely that's what you want to do more of, and bring experts in who can go, right, you know what, I've done this 11 times before. I'll help manage your crisis management solution. I'll help detail the statement of work behind your data migration project. And get them to come in. That, for me, I think if done properly, that could be an additional selling position for a good talent partner. So you actually sell advisory services to build statement of work offerings and then deliver statement of work offerings. And actually it's increased value for the customer too, because this saves them time, and it allows for them to ensure that the person who's designed their statement of work has done it 11 times before, 10 times before, so it's going to be right.
Yeah, and ultimately what they care about most is getting the piece of work done, the not falling behind their deadlines, the stakeholder being satisfied, their client being satisfied, their product going to market on time.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's massive value there. And
Johnny, it's the same reason why, very same reason why I work with you. Instead of trying to design my own portal, it's not that we can't. You know the size of our group, but for me personally, I know what I'm good at. I'll just rather do more of that.
it's yeah, exactly. We always say sticking to your knitting.
Absolutely.
As a tech provider, people are always saying to us, "Oh, does your system also do this? Does the system also do that?" No, and we don't intend to do any of those other things because we're just focused on the end-to-end life cycle of anything delivered under a statement of work. But the only way to be really, really good at doing that is just doing that, exactly as you're saying. So we don't provide all the kind of advisory services around our platform because ultimately partners like yourselves, that's what you guys do, and that's where your expertise lies. And I've seen recruitment and workforce services organizations evolve massively over the years. Like I say, I've got my original background is in the job board sector. I remember back in the day, job boards were really just first starting to get some traction. And everyone was kind of saying, oh, recruitment agencies, it's the end for recruitment agencies. It literally couldn't have been further from the truth. Yeah. A high percentage of job board revenue to this day will still be recruitment agency revenue, by far the bulk of their revenue, the bulk of the vacancy, because recruitment organizations are very adaptable. They're good at solving problems, and they adapt to technology generally faster than the end clients can possibly even think about it. But also, they're just good at solving problems. And if you take the problems associated with managing a contingent workforce program, transitioning, workers in an IR35 payroll situation, dealing with, issues of trying to keep your permanent headcount where you want it to be, upskilling, talent programs, a lot of the same principles apply, particularly to a contingent workforce solution, to what's required in a statement of work-based solution, where you need to have the right suppliers, they need to be compliant, the work needs to be done in the right way, selection needs to happen properly, business stakeholders need to be assisted in the buying process.
Yeah.
Everything needs reporting on, everything needs refining, savings need to be made. And for organizations, of course, they could do that themselves. They could, adopt technology and do that themselves. But if they come to somebody like yourselves, who, as you say, if you've done this multiple times before and you have a solution that's ready to go, that reduces the headache for them. So I think it's a massive opportunity.
Exactly. And, there's a cultural challenge there as well, because if those companies who choose not to do this, and they know that they need somebody for a short period of time for a deliverable project, and they hire those people permanently, knowing they're going to make them redundant after it's done. Actually, that's really bad for your culture. And secondly, if you then bring them all in on fixed term contract as effectively permanent employees, and they're really high skilled individuals that are hard to find, then you're going to have a massive challenge in attracting the talent in the first place. There are rock stars out there who work independently, who are very, very good at something that is inch wide, mile deep. They understand it inside out. They don't know anything else. They're probably good at nothing else apart from that one thing. And that's the expertise they've created. And when you've got a specific niche outcome-based project that you need delivering, and you need someone to just come in, work independently and do that, statement of work is the best way to do it.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you said about the impact on culture with all of these kind of potential scenarios. But I think if you have different work streams where, you know, some stuff is it makes most sense for your permanent employees to do that. Some stuff it makes most sense for your contingent workforce to do that, and other stuff you're just going to get delivered on an outcome basis under a statement of work. I think I personally would put forward the argument that that has more of a positive impact on your culture, in the sense that if you do it other ways, you mix things up. I think that can have a real negative impact. Where if people know where they stand, you know, ultimately the people that an organization deals with within a supplier, of course they should still treat them well. They're still people. They should still have a good relationship with them, and they need those suppliers, especially where they're niche suppliers, in the same way that they need to give the contingent workers a good experience, because if that's the culture of their company, they need to present that to them. And likewise with how they manage their permanent employees. But they are different scenarios. And I think if it's clearly different, then it's working on different bases, then there's room for that culture to exist within the permanent team and within the company as a whole, and to spill over into the other engagement models, because everyone's really clear on where they sit, what liability they're taking on, what benefits they get from the way they're working.
Yeah, and they become very different. One of the things I deal with regularly, and not just in my career, but in my personal life as well, I have loads of friends who work in tech companies or banks and things like that, and some are contractors and some are perms, and you know the permies generally would say, oh, contractors are lazy, oh they're not invested in the company, or they're just there to earn their hourly rate, and the contractors would say, well, the perm people are just jealous of us. They're just jealous because they're not earning as much money as we are. And you get all these, there's a little bit of an animosity situation where you get a perm person who's got the same job title and a contract person who's got the same job title. And they, you know, people find out that contractor is on a lot more money. And then you get things like, you know, sometimes you might get stories of a contractor who's intentionally prolonging the contract, because they've intentionally left some broken code or something wrong in the project, because they know now that they're going to want to prolong it, because unintentionally, of course, from a behavioral economics perspective, there's a Cobra effect, where there's an incentive for the contractor to not finish the job quickly, because the longer it goes on, the more they get paid, because the contract carries on. So statement of work fixes that, because you're only getting paid on the milestone and deliverable. So if you haven't delivered it, you're not getting paid. You haven't met your requirements. So first of all, you've overcome that potential unintentional incentive to want to prolong your contract for no reason. And also, you've made that function different enough from a permanent employee, for the permanent employee not to feel like they're being hard done by, because you're saying, well, no, I don't talk hourly rates with me. I came in to deliver this data migration. You were going to pay me X amount for this migration. I've done the migration, and here's how much you owe me. You don't start comparing how much your salary is compared to the tiler who comes and does your tiling for you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's a few things that have happened that have really accelerated this understanding of outcome-based work delivery. I always describe it as, it's a statement of work as a contract that says, I will pay you X to deliver Y.
Yeah.
Simple as that. But obviously there's a lot of complexity within the depth and breadth of it, because it could be really massive projects or it could be really small projects. But I think the gig economy has helped drive awareness of this, and it's pushed that trend towards outcomes. You know, some gig platforms, some gig work is still hourly, but actually a lot of it is just fixed price. You know, I'll pay you X to create a logo or whatever it might be. So even at that very, very micro level, people have subtly been getting more used to just the idea that they'll agree to a price, and the person that delivering the piece of work has to take on the risk that they've quoted the right price, they're going to be able to do it, they're going to get it done to the satisfaction, and they're going to make the margin that they need to make.
Yeah.
So that's helped. But also I think remote working during the pandemic has thrown open some interesting conversations around this, because for some organizations, I mean, I know that some really large organizations have had the difficult struggles of everybody suddenly working from home. Are they working? I can't see them. You know, they're not in the office. They're on Teams.
Yes.
Are they watching Netflix?
Yeah.
You know, so you hear these stories of people kind of, you know, throwing around the ideas of, should we have, you know, monitoring software on people's computers at home so we can see when they're working and when they're not working. But then you look at that and go, surely you're better off just saying, this is what I need you to do. It doesn't matter when you need to do it. You might need to be teaching your kids, or, you know, or looking after a relative, or doing whatever, walking the dog. As long as you get this done, then that's fine. You can do it when you need to do it. During this really difficult time, it's forced that. And I think that's a very healthy way to be able to look at it, because everybody's circumstances are different. And to a certain extent, it enables diversity, because it allows people to work in all sorts of different situations and different locations, etc. But
and
I think those two...
It's the most meritocratic as well.
It's most what, sorry?
It's the most meritocratic.
Yeah.
You know, I was really never a big fan of presenteeism. And just because, you know, I said, if I can do something in 3 hours that someone else takes 12 hours doing, where's my upside? Where's my upside? Because the guy who sits in the office till 9 p.m. at night doing the job they should have done by 5 p.m. is considered having a strong work ethic. Well, if you study and develop and work hard and you're able to work something and get it done by 4 p.m., what does that mean? Does that mean you haven't got a strong work ethic? You know, so I think it's also very meritocratic.
Yeah, and the pandemic has kind of put so much pressure on companies that stuff like that, to a certain extent, has had to go out the window. And it's because it's about productivity. I mean, it's like if you look at the supply chain issues during the pandemic, where it's been a question of, we need X amount of PPE, just sort it out. You know, companies and procurement departments have had to go into like emergency mode, and it just cuts through any rubbish, and it's pure pragmatism. And I think there's definitely a kind of a flow-on effect from that. But it's just in the cost pressures. You know, companies are looking at everything now and saying, we need to save money. What are we doing? How are we getting this done? And yet they're under pressure to, you know, supply chains. There's massive demand for delivery of goods and materials that aren't available. So there's a big pressure throughout the kind of manufacturing, distribution, retail supply chain. And then that has a knock-on effect in all areas. So no companies can afford to be complacent with it now. But if you look at how, so the ultimate scenario is a company has a super flexible resource capability. They've got different channels of how they get things done, and they can access them all efficiently, and they know when they need to use the different ones. How do you think companies can work towards that? And what are you seeing in the market in terms of people thinking about that or trying to do it?
I think at the moment, the market is still just recovering. And I think we'll have to bear with that for a while. We continue our good work, creating awareness, keep fighting the good fight as such. But there's a long way before people fully recover and really start thinking about growth in a really structured, pragmatic, and logical way. At the moment, people are just trying to. It's a mad rush to the door. You know, it's just I'll pay you 10 grand a year more. I'll pay you 20 grand a year more. I'll give you this and I'll give you this. And it's just a war for talent. People just throwing money at it. Throwing money at anything rarely solves the problem. That's one thing. The second thing, the solution, as which you refer to as part of the first part of the question, is just my opinion. But I think that companies should really go back to what are they best at, and their permanent workforce, as much as possible, should be focused on doing what they're best at and outsourcing everything else within reason. So instead of trying to do everything yourself and try to be loads of different people, try to work through projects to deliver things that you're not your best competency. and have a permanent workforce that does, so you stay focused. Otherwise, it's very easy to create silos and have all these different functions in your business that actually don't add to your ultimate USP. But now you've got them, they're permanent employees, now they've got a voice, now they've got a committee, now they've got meetings, and they start to have an impact on which direction your company goes. Whereas if your core employees are only fully focused on your key deliverable, the one thing that makes you world class, and then everything else is done through third-party experts who deliver things through a project, it's a higher chance of you remaining focused on what you're best at.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, would you agree that there's an argument to say that that can have massive positive benefits on the overall culture of the organization, and also the kind of purpose or value proposition that that company has, in the sense that, if some organizations can look at it and go, if we outsource more, we're diluting our culture, we're diluting our value. But I would argue that if you're focused on doing the things that make you world class, and all of your permanent team are absolutely fully aligned on that, then surely that's just going to solidify and strengthen your culture and your value proposition. The other stuff is things you need to get done, bring in expertise to get it done.
Exactly. My mentor taught me that. He was years ahead of his time, and to this day I'm just trying to make that vision a reality. He told me a recruitment business should be recruiters and customers, and everything else within a recruitment business, within reason, that can be outsourced should be outsourced. So your business is focused on nothing but serving the customer. And we're still not there yet. But I think the more businesses that focus on that, the better you'll be, because you never forget your values, you never forget what makes you valuable in the world. It's pivotal.
Yeah, and if you look at specialism in the sense of service providers, that very much matches up with specialisms in the way that people use technology. People don't always try and find one thing to do everything. In their personal life and in their work life, they'll have specific applications that all kind of sit alongside each other, or just deal with their specific thing, because you're never going to get that level of quality if you're trying to do everything.
Yeah.
So in terms of the risks for organizations, obviously we discussed around IR35. Firstly, companies need to make sure they're compliant.
Yeah,
absolutely. They should have done that already. Like you say, a lot of people kind of left it late, understandably. With the pandemic, that we had, an election. We had a situation where it's kind of like, is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? Even right up to the end, some people were still wondering whether, because of COVID, it wasn't going to happen or not. So people need to get their ducks in a row on that side and make sure that their contractor populations are compliant. They also need to, the umbrella side of things, I think, there's some kind of quite concerning things that you hear in the market around that side of it. And I'm not sure how many companies are really aware of the risks around that. I don't know if you come across that at all much.
Oh, loads. But I'm just, the government could stop it tomorrow, but they've chosen not to. So what can you do? It's the most unregulated, the wild, wild west of our sectors. I don't know any sector that is as badly governed as the umbrella company sectors. They just, thing is you get to make money now and pass the risk on to somebody else.
Sounds great.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Okay, so I can just make money through commissions right now, Wolf of Wall Street style, and then pack up my offshore limited company and run away into the sunset and leave the end client or the contractor with the debt obligation. Wow. Okay. Why has no one stopped this? This is something I get quite passionate about. It's ridiculous. It takes one change in legislation to put a stop to it. It cannot happen anymore. You're either a fully bona fide contractor or you're not. That's it.
But I don't know the specifics of it, but I know there was talk of a government review into it. But I think that was like, I don't know, expectations were that it might be next year or something like that people start looking at it.
Oh, well, if it happens, it happens. Next year, the private sector is going to have even more chaos, because in the public sector, there were still governing bodies who saw large chunks of that spend. So the NHS could come in and try to regulate something, or governments could try to come and regulate something. Local authorities could try to mandate. So there was some degree of control, at least in the public sector, if you know what I mean. But in the private sector, I mean, this could run away with it. This could absolutely run away with it. Loan charges, dividends, offshoring, the whole lot. I mean, it's going to be messy.
Yeah, and organisations are going to need to take the right advice, and then they're going to need to take the right strategic advice. And I think we're seeing a lot more organisations working with a strategic workforce solutions partner rather than just lots of different providers. That kind of move to a partner type model. So obviously there's the risks around doing that all right and making sure they're compliant. Obviously there were talent shortages anyway. The type of talent that's in demand has probably been changed drastically in some ways by the pandemic, and talent shortages are much worse in some areas, and there's new areas of demand that are really difficult. But how much, so if you look at the factors that could limit a company over the next 5 years, where companies are really trying to grow and hopefully the economy pushes itself forward in a really positive way, what do you think will be the major limiting factors for companies when they're faced with these skills shortages?
Flexibility. Simple. I had an article recently. I was on Talent International on diversity and inclusion. And it was the same answer. You can't have inclusivity without flexibility, and you can't win the war for talent without inclusivity. So if you can't be flexible, you will lose. The war for talent will not work. People are conscious of how flexible you are as a business, and people are conscious of how inclusive you are as a business. And so to make blanket statements that fly in the face of that is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Like every single one of our workers are going to be permanent. Well, not every single person who's a contractor is a tax dodger, right? Some people are amazingly talented people, but their lifestyles, their parental reasoning, or whatever, for perfectly bona fide reason, require them to work in a different way to a permanent employee. Does not make them a bad person. If you as an organization cannot adapt the way you work with people and be as flexible as you possibly can be, you will lose the war for talent.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it kind of comes back to what we were saying right at the beginning, where your view on talent and recruitment and resourcing and what a company is it's a combination of people with a purpose.
Yeah, correct.
And as I said, I feel like it aligns very well with my view on just, it's all about getting things done, because when it comes to getting things done, there should be no bias or prejudice, because you're looking to get something done. And when you have a clear purpose, then everyone involved in that purpose, who's bought into that purpose, their voice is important and is useful, because if the strategy of an organization is clearly communicated, anyone, and if they're from different backgrounds and have a different point of view, then that's going to add to the value of that organization. And this is where for me, the true beauty and value of diversity comes in, because it's about that. It's about, as you say, it's just people and purpose trying to achieve an objective. And if everyone has the same ideas, you might as well just have one person to a certain extent.
Yeah, it's just not going to work. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. I know it's not going to work. Let's just hope that it changes public opinion. And after the pandemic, we don't just go back to 5 days in the office. Everyone has to work through a PAYE payroll, and that's it. Like it never happened. I think this pandemic has been a very painful experience for the whole planet. A lot of people have lost loved ones. A lot of people have lost their jobs. A lot of people have faced massive austerity. Let's take some positive out of it, and let's bring that flexibility that we've had to go through the pandemic. Let's bring it into the real world, and let's make it scalable by working through reliable, efficient solutions like yourselves.
Yeah, I agree. And you know what the group of people within this pandemic, obviously it's been terrible for older people, it's been terrible for people with existing health conditions and all that sort of thing. And it's been a massive strain on everybody being stuck at home and all this. But I feel that the like kind of young people, university age, just looking to get into the workforce, everyone's been affected. But personally, I look at those people and I just think that must be really, really tough.
Yeah.
Maybe, just maybe, there's a silver lining on it, in the sense that if this new kind of approach to flexibility can actually transition through after the pandemic, which I believe it will, then maybe that's going to suit these youngsters much more so than trying to fit them into an old mentality. Because if you look back 60 years, you know, it was a job for life. That was it. You work for one company and you got a gold watch at the end of it, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Then we saw that kind of changing, the growth of the contingent workforce. We've seen the gig economy kind of spiking through, and then COVID comes along and changes everything. But for a lot of young people that were coming into the market, they're passionate about organizations with purpose. They want to align their views on the environment, sustainability, general ethical approach with the companies they want to work for, one of the most important factors. But also they want to do what they're good at, which kind of aligns with what you were talking about at a company level, and I think individuals as well. So that is helped by the ability to do project-based work. It is helped by the ability to work, you know, people can work around their life a bit more rather than having a work-life balance effectively, just kind of make everything fit how they want to do things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So actually, in some ways, I take an optimistic viewpoint. I hope that the pandemic will lead to some positive changes for people like that and for everybody where flexibility is required. But I think if companies, you know, some companies may come down heavily and go, it's all back to normal, it's all back to how it was. Surely they're just going to be at a disadvantage.
They will be, but they'll, you know, the expression "fighting to the bitter end" has an interesting story behind it, and I think it refers to the end of a noose. So I think some people will fight to the bitter end until they no longer exist. I mean, I've already seen so many of my competitors force their staff back into the office 5 days a week because, in my opinion, they weren't able to efficiently figure out ways on how to manage people remotely. Right. So unfortunately, it will exist until it doesn't. The best way to prove something works is actually to prove it works. And I think that's why people like you and I just need to keep going out there and delivering these solutions. And the more case studies we have on the efficacy of it, the more traction, the more like a snowball effect, the more popular they become.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't argue with results. And, you know, we're seeing certainly organizations are much more open to trying new things and reorganizing themselves. And, you know, I just think, the factors that are driving things at the moment can be harnessed for a positive outcome. But anyway, listen, thank you so much, Affi. That was a really, really interesting conversation. I really enjoyed that. I think, you know, there's so many other areas we could cover as well, but that's some real core kind of topic areas that I know you feel strongly about. I certainly feel very strongly about. It's really great to be able to chat through that with you. And I really appreciate your time.
That didn't feel like work.
Excellent stuff. Well, listen, thank you so much. And, you know, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. I've got some real positive vibes out of that conversation. And I look forward to hopefully catching up with you again soon.
Yeah, hopefully in person soon.
Yeah, look forward to that.
Great. Thanks. Cheers, Johnny.
Cheers, Affi. Take care.
See ya.